Now then, so the rugby season very much heating up. We have our Champions Cup on the horizon. We have Leinster Munster on Saturday at Aviva Stadium. This is the finale to the URC regular season. Leinster, of course, safely through with a home quarter-final. A win for Munster guarantees themselves a home quarter-final, but not guaranteed as things stand. Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent is here in studio. Thanks for coming in.
Cheers, Joe. Thanks for having me.
And Fiona Hayes, Grand Slam winner. Hey, Fiona.
Hey, Joe. How are you?
Very well. Loads to talk about. I saw, Cian, you were talking to CJ Stander today. Still only 31 years of age, 51 Irish caps to his name. He is resolute. He is not going back. He's had several offers. Now, the whole country said, CJ, come on. Come on. You're going back there. We'll see you pitching up in a few weeks' time. But he was deadly serious, in fairness to him, and he doesn't miss the contact, ironically enough, for CJ Stander. He was watching a game recently thinking...
The Toulouse game, yeah.
Oof, glad I'm here and not there.
And for a guy who dished out his fair share of punishment. Yeah, look, CJ's always great to chat to, and he was very good today. Again, he kind of started the chat by saying, I see a few names on there who said I'd be back playing rugby in a few weeks. Well, I've proven ye wrong, haven't you? So, and I was probably one of them as well, to be honest. I think everyone really did. You look at the shape he was in, to the naked eye anyway, I'd imagine he was probably playing through a lot of pain. And yeah, he's back in South Africa, and he works in a construction management company. Family is his priority now, and you can't begrudge a guy that at all, can you? He's got a young daughter, but he spoke a lot about what Limerick meant to him. There'll be a piece in tomorrow's paper about that. It's clear that he got real emotional actually when he started talking about what Limerick meant to him, because you have to remember, I think I was the first person to speak to him when he arrived in Munster, as in from a press point of view, and he barely had a word of English. This is back in 2012, I think it was. So you think about the 9 years that he had in Munster, and how much of a fan favourite he became, and how important he was to Ireland in 2018 Grand Slam success. He achieved a hell of a lot from a guy who was basically told he was too small to play for the Springboks. So yeah, it was a good catch up, and bonus Limerick references as well, which is always a good thing.
How has that passed me by? He barely had a word of English.
Yeah, so he's Afrikaans is his first language. Yeah. There's a famous story about I think it was a Christmas party, Christmas night out that the squad had. So he was only in the country a few months or whatever, and I think I'm right in saying he got lost on a night out in Cork, I think, and was struggling to find his way around because he couldn't speak English. So to see how far he's come now, and even he can kind of switch between the Afrikaans into English and stuff like that. So it was a good catch up, and like I said, for any Munster supporters or Limerick heads, it'd be worth reading tomorrow his thoughts on what the city meant to him as a whole.
Oh, very interesting. So clearly that's not uncommon in his neck of the woods to have no English.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Rassie Erasmus is the same. Afrikaans is their first language, and to be fair, you can still kind of see it sometimes when you're talking to them. But I just think it's a great story, and not many people. Look at someone like Dan Levy, who retired at 27 a few weeks ago and doesn't get to retire in his own terms now. 31 was certainly a shock in terms of calling it a day, but yeah, he has no regrets, and he did have offers. I've no doubt the Bulls were probably onto him in more super or URC clubs now, but he's no regrets at all, and he's loving life now on the farm, doing farming on the side as well as the construction management company.
I did see him say, Fiona, I'm just doing normal hours now, so I work from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I thought, that's not normal. It's a marathon day. Bloody hell. 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Put your feet up, CJ.
I suppose, but look, he can probably eat what he wants now. He doesn't have to worry about that side of things. And Joe, I have to tell you, being lost in Cork on a night out, Limerick English doesn't help you anyway, trying to find your way home down there.
What's this woman screaming at me? I can't understand what she's saying. Fiona, European Player of the Year 5-man shortlist has been announced. Josh van der Fleer, James Lowe, Caelan Doris, Gregory Aldred, Anton Dupont. Obviously, the final will dictate things a touch, but of those 5, who's your European Player of the Year and why?
Has to be Van der Fleer. I've every time, the minute it was released, even the first list, he's just been outstanding. He's performed in every game. His level of performance is even getting better with every game. He's improved his carries. People talked about his carries, and today we see a lot of stats around his tackle count, and even his tackle tech. He's staying injury free. So for me, he's been the absolute standout performer. I think the likes of Dupont, we know what he can bring. He probably in Europe he brought it in different patches, but no one's been as consistent as Van der Fleer throughout the whole thing for me.
Has anyone in the last decade improved as rapidly as Van der Flier at his age?
Yeah, it's a good shout. I'm sure we'll get onto it, but I think there's so many Leinster players, not to that degree, but there's so many Leinster players who have seriously improved over the last few years, and I just think that's down to the coaching. The players are clearly unbelievably talented, unbelievably skilled, but the manner of the quality of the coaching that they're getting, I think, is taking a lot of players to new levels. You think of James Lowe, Jamieson, Gibson Park. I think Ross Maloney is a perfect example of another guy. I don't think there's many people who would have said that Ross Maloney will be starting in a Champions Cup final and will be like a pretty much a key player for Leinster at this stage a few years ago. And I think so much of that is down to the coaching. I was talking about this in terms of Josh van der Flier at the Aviva with John Duggan on Saturday. Like, Leinster puts such a huge emphasis on the breakdown. We can all see why, because they play at such high speed and tempo, but they have a designated coach who coaches the breakdown. That's Dennis Leamy, and that's why Munster are trying to poach him now to take over their defence. But before Dennis Leamy, Hugh Hogan was doing it, and the Scarlets came in and took him. So the breakdown is so important for every team, for every country in the world. But Leinster actually have a designated guy who's working on it week in, week out. And I think Josh van der Flier has reaped the rewards of that. I think, the Rugby Players Ireland Awards are going to be on tonight, and I think, he'd probably be the hot favourite to win that as well. I think James Lowe has had a great season as well. He's scored 13 tries this season, and they've all come in his last 8 games. I mean, just a ridiculous record. And to be fair, everyone on that list, I don't think there's too many who have the skill set that James Lowe has, and we saw that again last weekend. I think Aldred is an outstanding player as well. If La Rochelle are to beat Leinster in the final, I think, and Aldred has a good game, I think he'll be nailed on. I don't know what Dupont is doing on that list. I know that might be sacrilege to say, but he hasn't had a great season by his very, very high standards at all. I don't know, was it a bit of keeping up appearances there or what, but I don't think he was that great in the Champions Cup this season.
Well, Alan Quinlan is one of those on the panel, so we'll take it up with him.
Don't tell him I said it though.
Just for the beauty of his penalties at the Aviva alone, Dupont gets in that list.
Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan, but
No,
I just don't think he's been at his best in the Champions Cup.
Definitely feeling the effects, I think, of a lot of rugby, isn't he? Fiona, last Irish player to win Men's European Player of the Year was?
Johnny.
No, Johnny's never won it.
Oh, Men's European. Oh, who was that?
Would you know?
Brian
Brian Driscoll has never won it. Never won it. See, there was
Jamie Heaslip.
Jamie Heaslip. Now, there was this issue. You remember Raj got like best player of the last 15 years. So that was in 2010. So I can't find a record of who won it before that. Maybe they only started it in 2010. The last winner, give this man some goddamn respect, Rob Kearney, 2012.
Kearney.
Come on.
We're never making on the crappy quiz here anyway.
I'm terrible. I'm
One shot and you're out.
Yeah. Rob Kearney 12, Sean O'Brien 11. And
yes, that's right.
Raj in 10. But no Irishmen since then. So you suspect that's odds on to change. So, Leinster Munster at the weekend. If we look forward for a moment, I'm sure we'll look back. Leinster have used 59 players thus far this season. You would presume it will be very much a second string affair from their point of view at the weekend. Fiona, Munster, a win for them guarantees them a home quarter final. That said, by kick-off, if results go their way, i.e. if the Bulls and the Stormers were to lose in Wales, then Munster would have a home quarter final, regardless of the result at the Aviva Stadium. They're without Zebo and Diolande. We're hearing O'Mahony and Mike Haley in trouble as well. Gavin Coombs is back this week, but unlikely to play. It's hard to be frothing at the mouth for this one, even though it is Leinster Munster. What are you expecting from this game?
Yeah, I think it's a good shot for us to get to watch a good game because you've guys, especially with Leinster second string, you've guys trying to make a European final, a panel, so there's lads going to be trying to push there. That's not really set in stone. Obviously, starting positions are thereabouts are set in stone probably in Leo's mind with a lot of positions, but you've guys that are trying to get onto that panel and this game could be something if they made an impact in that. So they're going to be chomping at the bit to come out and play a Munster team up in the Aviva. Obviously Munster, a lot has been talked about their form and how they've gotten better and better, and I think it would be absolutely terrible to come out after that Toulouse game and having put everything on the line and lose up in the Aviva to what people are calling a second string Leinster team. We know Leinster obviously have the players and the backup, can you even call it second string, but obviously it wouldn't be their starter for a European Cup final. So it's very, very important for this Munster team to keep on kicking in, and they're probably going to be looking at, if at all possible, trying to get that bonus point as well, which will give them advantage then going into the semi-final if they can kick on from the quarter-final, because they would like obviously to be using Thomond Park for that as well.
I was a touch surprised, Cian, when I saw Leinster have used 59 players this season. I just assumed, given the fewer number of matches in the URC, not least when players are away on international duty, that number would be rapidly coming down, and we might see even players' contracts not renewed over the coming years, that there were new demands on squad depth. But 59 is a hefty number. I mean, I remember Joe Schmidt being lauded when he hit 50 for the first time.
Yeah, they've been consistently hitting these high numbers for the last few seasons, and there is talk now that the squad might not be as big next season, but you look at how well they manage it. You know, there was so much made of bringing let's call a spade a spade. It was a second string young team to South Africa, but it's how well Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster managed that period. Like, I remember I was in with you, talking to you about it just around the time, and that Lancaster stayed at home. Yeah. And Leinster are far, far better for that on both fronts, because they got their numbers up in terms of the 59. There was a couple of caps handed out in South Africa,
in the Lions' Den as well.
Absolutely, and those type of games are seriously going to stand. Like, I guarantee at the start of next season you'll see, like, Lee Barron, I remember, was a young hooker who got capped in South Africa. Like, he could potentially start the first game of next season. People are going, oh, who is this guy? But you forget that he was actually away in South Africa for 2 weeks, going to an extremely tough place against, like, particularly that Sharks team who were loaded with Springboks. So unbelievably impressive numbers, but it's the quality of players that they're bringing in. I was chatting to Hugo Keenan today, and he was sort of saying during that period when most of the first team were in Dublin, they had to get sub-academy lads, so they were digging even deeper down into the talent pool. And he said, the first day you'd know that they hadn't quite trained in a Stuart Lancaster infamous training session, but he said by the end of the week, he said it was ridiculous, like that the players just get it instantly. So that they're the calibre of young players. Like, they very rarely bring duds even into the sub-academy. I mean, you only get in there if you're of a certain quality, and it was interesting to kind of hear Keenan talk about the level. Like, these guys are only fresh out of school, but at 1 week with Stuart Lancaster's training, and they were already up with the calls and things like that. So 59 is an incredible number, really, but wow. It's so impressive.
Just what Munster want to hear, Fiona.
Yeah, and with just on that point as well, Joe, with that, I think it's so good, and that's why we're seeing the likes of Johnny come into really good form, Johnny Sexton, Doris, because they're able to be rotated enough. If you compare them to the French guys that they're playing against, who've probably played 29, 26, 27 games, some of these players have probably played maybe 12 to 18 games, and that shows when it comes to the end of the season. And Leinster have the luxury to do that because they have the talent pool coming in, and I think that's what's making these guys so effective in this Leinster squad coming into these last few games.
Yeah, wasn't it interesting, Ugo Molloy making that point about Sexton and Intermac, 12 matches versus 27. And to be fair, Fiona, I mean, if we segue into just how good Leinster were on Saturday, one of the most striking aspects from minute one was one team here is uber fresh, sharp, fit. The other team were running on fumes a touch, really.
Yeah, you could see it from the off. Obviously, Leinster were exceptionally hungry. They're really hungry for that fifth star. You could see it in how they played. That nothing to take away from Leinster, but that wasn't the Toulouse squad that we've seen in Europe in previous occasions. Probably saw a touch of it up in Ulster at times, but it wasn't the type of game I thought they'd bring. Obviously, they were really tired. I think we especially saw that in the front row. I thought they weren't as effective around the pitch. Maybe at scrum time they were at times, but I just thought it was just, even DuPont, you talked about him there, Cian, we didn't see his best form really in that game. Intermac, the playmakers, I mean, Thomas Ramos was very, very good, and they had certain players, but just as a squad, Leinster looked so much fresher. They played the best rugby. They never ever looked like they were going to lose that game from minute one, and their key players were probably playing some of the best games they've played in a long time.
Is there a Leinster player out of form right now?
No.
You could almost say, I could almost say, who's the under appreciated cog in that wheel, and you could pick anyone there 1 to 15 and speak glowingly for a paragraph about them.
If you look back at their last 3 games at this particular, the first choice team have played was, so we'll say, Connacht at the Aviva, Leicester away, and Toulouse last weekend. They've all been 8 and 9s out of 10. Absolutely exceptional. And the funny thing, apparently, in the review on Monday with Stuart Lancaster runs the reviews. you know, there was an acknowledgement of how well they played, but the big focus was, why were we 7-3 down early on? And that, to me, sums up the mindset of this Leinster team. Like, I wonder at times, do we actually appreciate how, like, what we're actually watching at the moment in terms of the style of rugby that they're playing? Because, like, we're so used to, like, a Toulouse team or whatever playing this unbelievable type of rugby and going, oh, it'd be great if, like, an Irish team could adopt that. So at times I wonder if we appreciate, like, there's going to be a bit of coaching, you know, there could be coaching upheaval in Leinster over the next couple of years, so we might not always be like this. Now, obviously, they still have to go on and deliver against La Rochelle, but, like, I mean, I would certainly expect that they will. But the fact that, you know, the big focus was on, okay, like, why were we down to these guys? We ended up winning really well, but, like, we shouldn't be behind in this game. So it just goes back to my earlier point. I just think the coaching is just unbelievably good at the moment in Leinster. And you know what, like we said, we're seeing players improve, but, like, it's young guys as well. And Fiona kind of made the point there, but, you know, guys are playing to try and get into the Champions Cup squad, the match day squad next week. But the reality is, like, is anyone really, is the 23 going to be any different than what it was last week? Like, injuries permitting, because
someone's going to have a hell of a game against Munster.
Absolutely. Like Jordan Larmour is going to need to score a hat-trick or 4 tries to get on it as 23rd man. Like, that's the reality of how well Leinster are playing at the moment. Now, obviously, they do have a couple of injuries, and there are a couple of key injuries as well. So if they're not fit, that could upset the apple cart a bit. But they're just humming at the moment, absolutely humming.
I think you're right on the do we appreciate it point. It was only funny, just been in Virgin on the Sunday for the La Rochelle Racing game, Matt Williams, and we were just, you know, chatting during the game as we do, and Leinster we were still, you know, talking about how good Leinster had been the previous day, and he was just saying, it's unique. This is unique in world rugby, what you guys have here. And it's almost when an outside voice says it, and Matt really has a great feel for the global game and has been all over the game for decades around the world, and he was saying, you know, to play that brand of rugby, to have coaches, Stuart Lancaster aside, there are exceptions to all of these points I'm making, but to have coaches who've come through at Leinster as players, to have the vast majority of the players from the immediate hinterland, and you know, there's the James Lowe and Gibson Park, and there's a Caelan Doris sprinkled in, but in effect, all the players from the immediate hinterland, it's just like it's the Barcelona of European rugby. It's absolutely staggering. Perhaps one of the reasons we don't appreciate it is, and I was just thinking about it, Fiona, watching the Toulouse game, unlike, say, in football, where you see Man City's best 9, 10, 11 most weeks, playing their best stuff most weeks, rugby doesn't allow that. We're talking about the freshness of a Johnny Sexton. I was just talking to a friend who said, I feel like I haven't really seen Leinster play much this season until the Toulouse game. I was kind of saying, well, in a way you haven't, because they don't really have to play until about April. You know, they've only really kind of had a bit of a flex for the Leicester game and the Toulouse game, and so it's only maybe in this part of the season that they show everyone just how good they can be.
Yeah, you definitely see glimpses of it in games, but they haven't been as clinical as they have been in those few games, and it's super to watch. You know, I was watching the Blues at the weekend. I was watching the Super 15 rugby, and some of their scores were absolutely outrageously good, and I was getting excited. But watching that, they just don't offer the same thing in defence. You just don't see that. They're massively high scoring games. But what we saw with the likes of Leinster, and what we're seeing is their defensive system is so good. Their breakdown work, everything is on the money. The way they work with the referee is so good. And obviously they play that attacking style of rugby as well. That offloading game has come on in the last couple of years. So they're playing the same style of rugby, but they're looking at all areas of the game. And I mean, their set piece at the weekend, I think they had 100% scrums. I know there was penalty advantage and they're not counted in the stats sometimes, but there was 100% on their own scrum, and they had 91% accuracy in the lineout. So they seem to have nailed all the areas and look like they're definitely enjoying the rugby. And it's when you say it like that, you know, that we don't appreciate it. I think it's clear that we don't, because what we're seeing is and if they go on to win it, we'll say that this is probably one of the best performances in Europe, especially the Toulouse game, and hopefully we'll get the same in the final, because the French power didn't look anywhere like they could do anything in that Toulouse pack. And I'll be looking on to see what La Rochelle and what area they will try and target. There isn't really a weakness they can target in this Leinster team.
Interesting, because I was listening to you chatting on the left wing with Will and Luke Fitzgerald, Cian, and you were saying if there is, and like, because you got a nitpick here. I mean, if that's a glimpse into Lancaster's team meetings, I think we're entitled to.
Exactly.
You think there is a question mark over Leinster scrum?
I do, yeah. Now I bow to Fiona's superior knowledge of the scrum now.
I'll set you up to fail here against Grand Slam winning Prof. Go on.
Well, like, they've conceded 9 scrum penalties in the last 2 games. I mean, that is not good. They conceded 5 in Welford Road against Leinster and 4 last week. Now I know Tadhg Furlong went off, but there's been issues when Tadhg Furlong was on the pitch as well. I think it's an area of weakness, I do, and I think it's an area of weakness for Ireland at the moment as well. You know, so much depends on Tadhg Furlong's fitness, but Leinster really struggled against this La Rochelle scrum last season, and you saw the way they played against Racing. Like, that's how they're going to look to play against Leinster as well. They're just going to look to take the game to them up front, and you know, if they do, if Rog does pull a large rabbit out of the hat by having Will Skelton back, then that adds another like layer of serious beef as well to it. So I do think it's an area of concern. I know we've chatted about it before, Joe, about the depth chart, and I won't go into that again in terms of Irish rugby, but it's not even a depth chart issue really at the moment. It's just whatever is going on, the teams are targeting the Leinster scrum. And the point I was trying to make, because I was actually writing about this on Monday, and you're kind of like, do I really want to go down this road of like trying to nitpick what was one of the great European performances? But you hear stuff like how Stuart Lancaster carries on in reviews, and they are looking to be the pursuit of perfection is essentially what it is. So I think they are going to have to really tighten up on that area, because like I said, La Rochelle will certainly go after them. And just on the point of, you know, appreciating what this Leinster team are about and what they do, I think they're a quite likeable team as well. I just don't think there's any like major huge egos. I think they're all pretty like grounded fellas. I don't get the sense that anyone is losing the run of themselves. And I would have been talking to a couple of Irish coaches who were coaching abroad like over the last couple of months or whatever, and you can apply whatever we're saying about Leinster to Ireland as well, because it's essentially the same thing. But I was amazed by how many of them told me that they use clips of Ireland in their team meetings, and before that would have been unheard of. But it's the respect that other players have now. So Hugo Keenan is a good example. I know one particular Irish coach was using a lot of Hugo Keenan in terms of how he marshals the backfield, and this is a guy who's only just after pretty much breaking onto the scene. I mean, he's never even been to a Champions Cup final as a fan, let alone played in one, you know. So the respect, I think, of Irish rugby and Leinster rugby in particular, we heard during lockdown how themselves and the Crusaders were sharing ideas and stuff. So that's the level of esteem that they're being held in at the moment. So I just think like people within Ireland, I know it's obviously difficult for non-Leinster supporters, but just to appreciate the kind of rugby that they're playing, and hopefully, like, we've already seen that it's having a knock-on effect with Ireland, but you know, going down the summers into New Zealand is going to be the ultimate test of that.
Yeah, and Fiona, just on the scrum point, I'll give you a chance to come back, because again, to my, and I emphasise, very untrained eye, I did see the Toulouse scrum go through Leinster a couple of times on Saturday. So why did that not give you cause for concern as such?
Yeah, you see, it's obviously all got to do with the referee, and I think especially with Furlong, I think a lot of guys angling him. When Ala Toa came on, I thought he was in trouble. I actually thought that it was so early in the game. I thought they might have, now Leinster, obviously it's not even on their books, but I thought there might have been a chance of maybe Healy coming on and moving Porter back across, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that. Maybe it depends on Furlong's availability, but definitely Ala Latoa, scrum wise, he's going to be targeted. We saw Cyril Boyle absolutely busted through him and stuff like that, and they were taken there. I suppose on the whole outcome of the game, it wasn't very, very important, because it just, the scrum dominance wasn't shown for Toulouse. But if you're going to a European final, it's definitely somewhere they will have to target. I think personally, and I've said this a lot of the times, I think the front row of Porter, Furlong and either two hookers, I think the scrummaging wise, Leinster, you know, when I've watched it, when they have given away penalties, I've thought the referee there's been angles in them, and they'll have to deal with that. And Wayne Barnes is definitely going to be watching that area. So it is obviously a focus that they'll have, but it wouldn't be an area of concern to me, even though the Toulouse, and we know what La Rochelle done, and they got a good few penalties out of Racing as well. I mean, you've got Antonio and Priso in the front row, and they're just immense. But I really feel like Leinster can, if they can get their main frontline guys out there, and hopefully Furlong will be fit, I think they'll be looking to hold and secure their own ball, which is what they done. They had 100% success rate on their own ball, whereas when Toulouse were attacking, that's when they got damaged. So they probably will work around that area of setting a bit lower when it's on a Toulouse ball, or a Rochelle ball.
Just a quick final point on that, Joe. I think like all it takes takes, I think, is a little bit of a doubt to be in a referee's head at all. In the last few games, like Leinster have been conceding scrum penalties, and that I think is an issue because you don't want to get a reputation as a scrum that coughs up penalties. And at the moment, like I said, 9 in 2 games is not great. But Fiona makes a good point. I think Wayne Barnes is a good ref, and he was announced today as a ref for the final next week. So no doubt Leinster. No doubt O'Gara and Donncha Ryan will be getting on to Wayne Barnes through the official channels during the week and going, well, you know, they concede scrum penalties, and Leinster will be doing the opposite. So intriguing battle.
Yeah. We're talking here with Cian Tracey from the Irish Independent and Fiona Hayes as well. Our Wednesday Night Rugby coverage is brought to you by Vodafone, proudly supporting the Irish women's rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Fiona, will the Thomond Park attending Munster fan be supporting Leinster against La Rochelle?
Oh God. Do you want me to answer that, really?
So it's Raj over an Irish
Raj.
team. Yeah, okay.
It's Raj. We have to go to Raj. Look, I'm getting stick sometimes for being a pro Leinster. You know, back in the day I would have been like, no. But look, you have to give plaudits to how they're playing rugby, and I thoroughly enjoyed the game on Saturday. On the other side of things, on Sunday, I couldn't understand what Racing or La Rochelle were up to. Look, they look like 2 tired teams, and there wasn't much. So I'm just going to be watching it for the rugby and focus on that. And whoever plays the best rugby, I'll applaud.
Very diplomatic. I want the truth here. I'm going to WhatsApp you and read out what you actually say back.
He wants to be allowed to be let back into Limerick again.
So, I mean, this final is so intriguing in a whole host of ways. Weather could influence things and maybe bring the equation back towards La Rochelle a touch. Imagine Tyke Furlong's more injured than we all think, and imagine Will Skelton pops up as well, and who knows, maybe James Lowe, you know. So there's all these difficult things to predict, these aspects to the game, but on the face of it, you make Leinster huge favourites. I thought Ugo Molla made an interesting point where he was saying that it's very difficult for Toulouse to compete with Leinster when the average ball and play time in the top 14 is 32 minutes, and elite European rugby, Leinster, very comfortable in that environment, is closer to 40. So I don't know, are La Rochelle perceived as being a fitter bunch who can, you know, handle the 40 minutes? Because I do remember last year Rodden McBride in a press conference, and I don't think he'll be saying it again out loud. I thought it was like, oof, geez, because he made the point about ball and play time, and he felt that was an area where Leinster could take La Rochelle into a difficult place, and we all know how that finished up. So La Rochelle, your sense of La Rochelle's fitness, and then is it within Leinster's power to take them to 10, 15, 20 phases, or if La Rochelle want the ball out of play, they can just get it out of play one way or another? Because that whole area is going to be fascinating to see.
It's what Leinster's game is predicated on at the moment. It's speed and high ball and play time. I think Toulouse have probably suffered a little bit from France winning the Grand Slam. I mean, these lads just don't get a rest in the top 14. It's worth mentioning. So this weekend, on Saturday, La Rochelle are playing Stade Francais. La Rochelle are in 7th of the top 14 at the moment, so they really need to win. There's only a couple of games left of the regular season, so they really need to win to get into the playoff spots. And I think Ronan O'Gara has done a brilliant job at La Rochelle in sort of changing the culture, and that Europe does matter too, because apart from Toulouse, there aren't too many other French clubs who really take it seriously. And it was funny, even in the build up to the game last week, I was reading a French publication, and they were posing the question that is 3 French teams in the last 4 of the Champions Cup bad for the top 14, because they're not all guaranteed their spots in the top 14. So that's how the top 14 is still viewed in France. So in terms of the ball and play time and stuff, I thought it was really interesting as well, because I thought, of all the French teams, I would have thought Toulouse would have been kind of well up there in terms of wanting to play fast rugby. But like I said, they had so many guys who played for France in that Grand Slam, and I think they've probably suffered a bit of a hangover. Dupont is a good example of that. Even a guy like Marchand, and like Fiona mentioned Cyril Boy, you mentioned flexes earlier, Joe, but Toulouse started Cyril Boy on the bench against Munster, and they still pulverised the scrum. So La Rochelle, they didn't have as many players playing for France, so that could be interesting. But look, they've got, we've already mentioned Will Skelton, but Tercar Barlow, their New Zealand scrum half, who won the World Cup with the All Blacks in 2015, is now out injured with a broken hand as well. They've huge issues at 10, I would say. I personally wouldn't want to be going into a Champions Cup final with Ohio West, like relying on him to kick your goals, because I think they're going to have to kick their goals against Leinster. They're going to have to take every single chance that they get, because Leinster don't really cough up too many opportunities. So I think Leinster will look to play the exact same way. Like, it's funny, like you mentioned the weather, and I think you're dead right. Like, think back to Bilbao. Like, it was absolutely horrific.
It was a leveller.
Horrific over there. So they're going to Marseille. The weather forecast, I was looking at it today, like, it looks good, but like you said, anything can happen on the day. But all things being equal, I think Leinster are 12-point favourites, I think, at the moment, and that's, like, in a final, that seems crazy, but I just feel that, you know, like, La Rochelle have a big game this weekend as well. They need to turn it around really quickly. Like, I'd be surprised if you're not going to see any Leinster player who's going to start against La Rochelle this weekend. You might see one or two from the bench, of Ross Byrne, players like that, but really and truly, they're all wrapped in cotton wool, while La Rochelle have to go out and batter it out in the top 14 again. It
does feel as if we're picking for reasons to be, like, cautious about being...
We're not used to it, are we?
Over optimistic on Leinster's behalf. Like, gun to your head, Fiona. Actually, sorry, that's an overly violent way to go about things. But I mean, if you were to be brutally honest, Cian said there 12 points is what the bookies feel like. Do you see, like, Alan Quinnan the last day said he saw Leinster beaten Toulouse by 15-20 and it sounded outlandish, and look what happened. Like, do you see Leinster winning this final comfortably if you had to make one very honest prediction?
I really do. I know when it comes to final time, and I know Raj will have a couple of things up his sleeve, but just based on the few performances that I've seen out of Leinster and the previous performances I've seen out of La Rochelle, and as Cian said, they have to go and play a big game against Stade again this weekend. They don't look energised, and Leinster look like they've had weeks off and they're about to start the season. They look energised, but that's also when they're playing. If things go wrong mid-game, that also changes. So if there was issues with the scrum, you know, that can give that La Rochelle team a bit more energy. But I think on player form and looking at, you know, teams of the week and all those, even those things, I think you'd have a majority of 9 to 10 Leinster players on your team of the week from the European Cup last week, and there probably would only been about 3 max La Rochelle players, you know. So look on form and how people are playing. I just think Leinster, they've said it from the start of the season. People talked about, they know what La Rochelle are going to bring. People have talked about how are they going to deal with this power game. They've shown, maybe not against the best Toulouse performance, but they've shown that they can deal with it. They've shown what their footwork is like in contact. They've shown that, you know, a lot of areas they've cleaned up. So I think it's a Leinster's, unless there's an absolute terrible performance, which you can predict, I would imagine Leinster are bang on the money for their 12-point win.
The favourites tag just doesn't suit the Irish psyche at all. Like, does it? I mean, even the bookies are saying Leinster at 12 points. You're kind of like, oh well, the scrum hasn't gone that well and things like that. So I think it's just a classic Irish thing to almost talk down their chances. But I think if...
I hear you, but then Welford Road, Aviva Stadium, Leinster firm favourites, and like they were actually... We didn't even realise just what firm favourites they were. You know, they blew that away, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. They took their foot off the pedal in that second half against Leicester as well, and they were just awesome last week against Toulouse.
I just don't... Like, it's funny you said about the thing about nobody getting ahead of themselves. I feel like with Johnny Sexton around, that's never going to happen. I just feel that dressing room is run very, very well somehow. And just a very last point, Fiona, again, this furthers the argument, and I feel... I'm imagining Ronan O'Gara out for a walk on a beach right now, listening to this and just going.
But he will love that, because he will try and put the Irish underdogs into La Rochelle, you know. So like they'll play on that as well. So it's a very interesting kind of, you know, battle, the mental battle almost.
Oh, it's like La Rochelle with a Munster chip on the shoulder. Like, this is what's coming. But on the point about Ian West, if anyone didn't see the game on Sunday, he didn't just miss his kicks. He missed them in such a worrying way. It was chronically under impressive, and he's averaging maybe 70%. This is, you know, not out of keeping with his general performance, and he had a great day against Leinster last year. He will need to have a great day again, but you're going into that game looking at him nervously, wondering what are we going to get from him today. Like, there's a certain irony when the camera cuts from him to Rog as well, you know. That's like this extra layer, I would think, on his consciousness, like one of the truly great kickers, clutch kickers, and he's watching me, and they were shocking kicks. There's no other way of putting it.
Look, they were absolutely terrible. And I was only having a conversation with someone recently about, and obviously it was on the back of that Leinster game as well a couple of seasons ago, but in general, and watching him playing over New Zealand, I thought his kicking game and it had come on loads, and Raj had done a lot of work with him obviously around that area. But whatever happened in that game, I know it's 70% at times, but look, last week was absolutely atrocious, and it was at times in the game when they could have pulled away or when they needed those kicks. So is that pressure? I don't know. And I thought he worked really well when I'm watching him. He works right with Kerr Barlow. When Retterie came on, I wasn't too sure about that. So they've got a few areas, that probably are nervous for O'Gara. And on that point as well, I understand it well. I'm only coaching at a small level, but if the scrum was going backwards, I take it very, very personal. If there was any cameras around, they'd see me crying in the corner. So I'm sure Raj will be working a good bit with him on that, or changing it, because even look, you talk about that Paddy Jackson will just say yesterday those three bad misses in extra time. Like, as a coach, after the second one, do you give it to someone else? You've got to make those rough decisions, and especially in a final when a player isn't, if it was way off a couple of them, I think he might have to make that decision and see what's best for the team going forward.
Okay. Well, plenty of time to preview that next week. Fiona Hayes, Cian Tracey, the Irish Independent. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.